hotel, then you see the road. I'm out to my soul into the size whenever the smoke clear out of my face and my picture perfect. Do it.
Hello and welcome back, fellow anime lovers, to Cypherfics. I am delighted to have you join us once again in the world of fanfiction and fantasy. This is the fourth part of What If Hazbinhotel Meets Binding of Isaac. Special note, this fanfic is written and a masterpiece of Gamer95 on FANFICTIONnet. Do check and support the author too. Now smash the like, share and subscribe button for more. Also press the bell icon so that you never miss such great parts. Thanks for the introduction. Now let's dive into the world. DMN that monster, even though she was dead she's still a pain in my ass. When I find her, I'm going to dash. It is here that Verosika widened her eyes in horror, remembering a detail. SHT. I haven't found that by it. She and Isaac could still meet again down here, was what she mentally screamed, while she crushed cutlery that she had in one hand, with such force that the metal object remained as if it were made of plasticine. She closed her eyes and let out a deep sigh to calm herself down. Okay, it's no big deal, I can hire someone to go and take care of her. I'm sure I can find someone I can trust enough to take care of it. I heard there was a new imp hitman, some little cowboy guy, he seems promising. Since previous efforts to find this woman had been unsuccessful, Verosika would need to hire the services of someone else, and that mercenary would surely be able to find this woman. Wow, you were hungry, Summer said, snapping the succubus out of her thoughts. She watched as Summer wiped Isaac's mouth with a napkin, who then proceeded to do the same to her red friend of hers, who had apparently been being fed by the child. Apparently, Isaac had eaten much more food than Verosika could consume for someone of the boy's age and size. She tilted her head to the side, wondering just why that was. He was such a skinny child, she had expected his little tummy to be unable to handle so much food at once. Did it have something to do with the boy's powers? Or it could be because he was very hungry, and he hadn't eaten anything decent, for who knows how long. Perhaps it was a mix of both, given how he ate with enthusiasm, delight, and also some underlying speed, Ronia's food. Perhaps the boy's strange abilities allowed or required him to eat more than a child his age would. Yawn. Isaac at that moment let out a yawn. Verosika blinked, then let out a soft chuckle. Sounds like someone needs a nap, she said, rising to her feet and gently picking the boy up in her arms, hugging him against her shoulder and gently patting his back. He let out a tired squeak and rested his little head against her shoulder contently. Well, it's time for you to go to sleep, honey, the succubus said while holding the child in her arms. Let's brush our teeth and put on our pajamas, you'll look so cute, Verosika said excitedly. Really? But he didn't get time to try the dessert, Ronia protested, a little disappointed. Yes, but he's already full, Verosika said. Ah, the disappointed imp Now, Ronia, there will be time for him to try that later, but you can still give the others dessert, Verosika said as she headed for the door, before stopping. Oh. And remember everyone that we have a meeting later, so I'll see you in the living room. As soon as I finish putting Isaac to bed, she remembered succumbing to all of them and left with Isaac. They went up the stairs and after a stop, where Verosika helped Isaac brush his teeth, they went to the boys' room, while Verosika explained some important things to him. Well Isaac, the red door at the end of the hall, is the door to my room. If an emergency occurs, or you really need me for something, you know where to find me, understood? She asked the boy, who nodded. Very good, you certainly learn very quickly, she said while she gave him a hug. She continued walking until they came to a very particular one. And this is the door of your room. The boy looked at the door in utter astonishment at what he had before him. The door itself seemed to be made of glass, and was very similar to the starry night sky, seen from a window, but what really astonished Isaac was that the door was not decorated with drawings or paintings of stars, but literally as if someone had taken a piece of the starry sky in all its splendor, with a galaxy in the center, and cut it out. Star-shaped gate. With a dark blue frame, with a golden sun and a silver crescent moon at the feet of the sun, with the words Isaac engraved. It was something very appealing and amazing for Isaac. Verosika smiled widely. "Do you like it? I saw the way you always looked out the window at the stars at night when it was time for me to leave, plus your drawings, and well, honestly, they kind of remind me of you. Because they bring a ton of light into a dark room, see? Things are dark in my life and you're lighting up the way." Isaac was impressed and touched by the appealing words that Verosika said, and he didn't know exactly what to say. And before he could answer, Verosika opened the door, so the boy could see the entire room, and when he visualized the room, Isaac let out a gasp of astonishment at what he was seeing. When Verosika turned on the lights, Isaac was able to see everything in detail, and if he had been amazed before, now his jaw had dropped in shock. From the ceiling hung what caught his attention at first, which was what looked like a chandelier, but made with the planets of the solar system, including the Sun and Pluto, but the particular thing was, that both the planets and the Sun did not seem to be made of plastic or something similar, besides that they were not connected by wires or something similar, but rather floated, with the planets floating around the Sun, in a slow and relaxing dance, around the parent star, which makes the bulb brighter. The ceiling was like the door, in the sense that it was an imitation of the night firmament, that is, a dark pink, blue, black sky with stars, and everything looks and moves as if it were a true vision of the cosmos, with what looked like galaxies in the background. The floor also seemed to be made of glass, with bright but static stars. The walls were the most normal, they were painted dark blue, with stars and planets whistled. The room was very big, almost double what Isaac's previous room was, that is, the one in the hospital. It took Isaac a while to process everything, but when he did, a feeling of familiarity came over him, as if he had already seen something similar somewhere, but he didn't know where. He quickly realized it. This place looks like the planetarium. So, what do you think? Asked Verosika with a little smile when she saw Isaac's astonished face, his mouth open and his eyes shining. Heh. I guess that means you're happy with it. Fine. I thought you'd want some stars when there aren't really any here in hell, so, yeah, I pulled some strings and got a little fancy magic to work on it, so now your room is full of stars and planets. Oh. And they glow in the dark too, see? She flipped off the light switch and the entire room was illuminated with the calming glow of the surrounding celestial bodies, leaving just enough light for Isaac to feel comfortable even when the light was off. Since the room was now dimly lit, bathed in a dim light, strong enough so that the room is not completely dark, but dim enough not to disturb Isaac at all when he went to sleep. Verosika turned the light back on, and when the room lit up, Isaac could see that there was more going on that he hadn't noticed before. There was a bed with sheets and a cosmos-themed frame, which matched the room. Next to it there were two nightstands, and in one of them there was a particular gray ball that shone with intense silver light, and that floated in a small plate, as it rotated. Isaac was slow to realize that it was some kind of full moon, but in miniature. In addition to that, there was also a small chair and a table, which were white in color, with many sheets and colored pencils, plus some drawings and he quickly realized that these were his drawings. Next to it was a small bookcase in a corner, with some books. He also saw that on one of the walls next to his bed, there was the door. Verosika walked over to the bed where she placed the boy, who immediately noticed how soft, fluffy, and comfortable he was, even when he was just sitting up. As Isaac reveled in the comfort, Verosika opened the closet, and pulled something out. Which one would be appropriate? Oh. This one, she said, taking something from inside the cupboard. Hey Isaac, what do you think? She asked, calling the boy's attention, who saw what Verosika wanted to show him. It was like her PJ, but black and white, and with cat paw markings and a tail. Verosika handed it over to Isaac, so that he could see it better. The boy left the outfit aside, and took out his notebook to write something. It was at this moment that Verosika had noticed that the notebook had not been in Isaac's hands before, but it had materialized. It was something that she looked at with interest, but she didn't give him time to analyze that in depth, since the boy showed her what he was writing. What is this? Asked the boy before the outfit was so familiar and different. This is a pajama, it's used to sleep, she answered. Like my PJ? The boy wrote in response. Yeah, like you. Wait, your PJ? Do you already have one of those? The boy didn't say anything, he just remained silent, and closed for a moment while he concentrated, and suddenly, an explosion of smoke appeared, a sky-blue pajama floating on a pedestal next to the bed. While Verosika looked at the pajamas amazed and curious, Isaac wrote, This is my PJ. Oh, and what is this PJ doing? She asked, a bit of uncertainty. Given what she had seen Isaac's items do, Verosika, and this was a new one, there were an infinite amount of different possibilities. It makes me feel cozy, Isaac wrote. Wait, it makes you feel cozy, that's all, doesn't it do anything else? She said, a bit confused. The boy stared at her a bit confused, and then wrote. It also heals me and gives soul hearts. This piece of information, although it was more in line with what Verosika expected an Isaac object to do, was no less surprising and confusing. Wait, it gives you hearts? I thought little Chad was the only one that had the ability to give hearts. Isaac shook his head, and that was all Verosika needed to know, to understand that the little red creature wasn't the only one capable of giving Isaac hearts. Okay, so which one do you prefer to sleep in, this pajama or the other one? Isaac looked at her confused, before writing. Pajamas? Is this pajamas? Yes, that's his name. Didn't you know that PJ was a diminutive for pajamas? She asked, to which the boy wrote. No, what's a diminutive? Let's say it's a short form of calling an object or a person. In the case of pajamas it is PJ, and in the case of a person named Andrew, for example, Andy, would be short, although not all names or things have a diminutive, like my name, Verosika, does not have one. Do you understand now? Verosika explained. Isaac began to write with concern on his face. Your name doesn't have a diminutive? Is that bad? Where can I get one? Verosika read and held back a laugh as she was touched by the boy's candidness and kindness. No, honey, that's not bad, and technically my name already has two diminutives, which would be Vero or Sika, but nobody calls me that and they don't sound good, so it doesn't really matter. She replied, and the answer seemed to calm the boy down. But back on topic, what pajamas do you want to wear today? She asked the boy. Your usual pajamas? She said, pointing to the floating pajamas, or a new one? She asked the boy, her hopes a bit low, since she really wanted to see Isaac in one of the new pajamas she bought, but Verosika knew that humans are construction animals, especially children, even more so with things that makes them feel comfortable or cozy, as is the case with Isaac. Isaac must have noticed her longing, or Isaac just wanted to try something new. However, to Verosika's pleasant surprise and excitement, the boy chose the pajamas that she bought for him. So, after Verosika turned around, to give Isaac some privacy to change, the boy put on his pajamas and saw how they fit. Oh, you look so cute, she exclaimed as she felt her heart melt when she saw the boy in the pajamas. How does it feel? Is it comfortable for you? She asked the boy, who after looking at himself nodded with a smile. For Isaac it felt almost like his PJ, something soft and light, although he didn't feel how it healed him, or gave him soul hearts, but he still liked it. Also he noticed that it had something on the neck, like a kind of hood. I'm glad. Oh, there's one more thing you need to see, she said as she walked over to him and pulled her hood over his shaved head, moving something in the pajamas at the small of Isaac's back. Okay, now look at yourself, she said as she led him to a large full-length mirror in the room. When Isaac looked in the mirror, he was shocked at what he saw. The hood had cat ears, and a matching tail, which were previously hidden, in black and white. The pajamas as a whole made him look like a cat. More specifically his former guppy cat. This is when Isaac began to cry, and an alarmed Verosika rushed over to him, worried by the sudden situation. Oh no. What happened? What's wrong? She questioned the worried demon that she might have done something very wrong, but to her surprise, she saw that the boy was smiling while he was crying, indicating that he was crying out of happiness. Unbeknownst to her, he was partly sad, but also happy about the gift Verosika gave him. She didn't seem to fully understand, something Isaac noticed from the worried and confused look the succubus gave him. So, without saying anything he went to the table where his drawings were, and after rummaging through the papers, he found the drawing he was looking for, and then he handed it to Verosika. She looked at the drawing. It was of a boy, obviously Isaac, holding a black and white cat, and Verosika quickly connected the dots. Oh, I'm so sorry, Verosika sighed, pulling him into a hug. So that's your old cat, huh? He sure was a cutie indeed. She was very much smitten with the little kitten, with his tiny size, and his appealing black and white fur coat. Isaac hugged the picture close, then pulled out his notebook again and wrote something down before presenting it to Verosika. She read it. It said, "Miss him." Verosika saw the look of sadness and melancholy, and her heart broke a little. She already knew the situation with Guppy and the other pets that Isaac had, how he loved all of them as a child, and the surely tragic end that all of them had. For beloved pets, for times that Isaac suffered the loss of the best and apparently only true friends of his, that Isaac had in his short life, one after another. No one should be forced to bear the loss of those they love, much less a child so young, especially one like Isaac. It was a heartbreaking situation for anyone. So Verosika moved away from him a bit, but still hugged him, enough to see the boy's face. I know how you feel, me too, I've lost people I loved, she said, her voice a little cracked and filled with sadness, surprising Isaac in the process. Yes, the loss is horrible, but let me tell you something that has helped me. She sighed and kept silent for a moment, while she thought better of how to tell Isaac. There is no magic formula or spell that makes pain disappear, but as long as you carry them inside of you, as long as you love them and don't forget them, part of them will always be with you, and with whom you share their memories. The succubus decided to omit that she tried to erase those memories, with gallons of the strongest liquor that hell and earth had, believing that it would make the pain of loss more pleasant, but in reality it only made it worse, since having forgotten them, she killed them even more definitively, since she does not remember many of them anymore. To her surprise, Isaac smiled with great emotion and enthusiasm, while his eyes shone with great joy. But seeing Isaac go from being sad and melancholic to remembering the loss of his friends, to now being completely opposite, made the succubus feel proud and happy, seeing that she helped the boy with his pain. And here I thought he was being a little sugar-coated, but what if it helps him keep going? Little did Verosika know that the reason Isaac was excited was because she had more reason than she thought. Well, it's time for you to rest, little star, she said as she settled Isaac on the bed, and once settled, Verosika began humming his favorite song. Once the succubus made sure that the child was asleep, she turned off the lights, both the moon-shaped lamp and the one on the ceiling, leaving the room semi-dark, bathed in the soft and relaxing glow of the stars. She closed the door softly, but not before taking a last look at Isaac's peaceful and smiling face, which filled her with happiness and hope. She closed the door and went to the living room, where surely everyone would be waiting for her, and several of them were waiting to receive explanations from her, regarding everything, so Verosika mentally prepared herself for it. She arrived at her destination, and indeed they were all there, her employees and the seraphim, who talked among themselves, and her gaze rested on her as soon as she entered. Seeing herself being the focus of everyone's attention, especially the angels, she cleared her throat and began to speak. Well, I know that many of you want and need an explanation. Isaac is already asleep, so we can talk in detail about the situation, so where do we start? Who wants to be first, and what do you want to know? She asked. Ooh, me. Pick me. Ronia said eagerly, raising her hand and hopping up and down. Yes, Ronia, what is it? Verosika asked. Okay, so I need to know all of his favorite foods so I know what to make for special occasions. I know that's not the most important question in the world to ask, but I just want to get it out there. I want a list when you have the time if that's okay, ma'am. Ronia explained. Verosika made an uncomfortable face. Well, that's going to be hard, she said with difficulty. Hard? Why? Is it a very complicated dish to prepare? Don't worry, Lady Verosika, whatever it is I can prepare it. No recipe is impossible for me. Especially if it's for that cupcake, she said with enthusiasm and determination. Although I admire your enthusiasm, Ronia, that's not really what it's about. The truth is that I don't know, she said, but the discomfort and disgust on her face told others that there was something more. Wait, you don't know? But you haven't been with him for 3 weeks, you should have some clue, right? Asked Ronia. I don't actually know what Isaac's favorite food is, but I do know what he apparently was eating and it's not pretty. What do? You mean? Ronia asks, a bit confused and fearful. Well, it looks like the only thing Isaac was eating before he found him was dog food and rotten food. This elicited a wave of horror-filled gasps. What? Ronia said in a low tone of voice, her eyes narrowing dangerously, flames gathering around her body. That poor boy was deprived of decent food. How dare those monsters, they will pay if I ever get my hands on them. Now I have to make every meal extra special from now on. I promise you that he'll discover his favorites in no time, Miss Verosika. Verosika smiled at Ronia's words and self-imposed mission, and answered. I'm happy you're willing to do that, I really appreciate it. Yes, I ask that whatever you're going to cook for Isaac, don't be too fancy or too spicy. Let's start with simple things, for now, then we can experiment, okay? Asked the succubus. Noted, Miss Verosika, said the imp with understanding. Okay. Now who's next? Dia, another of Verosika employees, raised his hand, and called everyone's attention. Okay, I have a question for you and for you also, Summer. A while ago, when we saw Isaac, Summer was delighted with the boy. That is not uncommon considering what he is. But then she began to purr, and this is not something she makes often, at the opposite, so my question is, what happened exactly? Dia ended his question, giving a look both to Verosika and her girlfriend. Verosika raised an eyebrow and thought about it for a moment. Well, I guess he just has a way with cats. He had a few cats back in the human world that he was extremely close to, so I guess the little guy just knows the right places to give Summer pets and scratches, although I didn't know it was that good, answered the succubus pop star. Before anyone could say or ask anything, the feline sinner spoke. Actually, Summer began slowly, it seemed like she was trying to fit the words into her mind. Is something wrong, honey? Dia asks curiously, seeing her girlfriend talking about her. Not really, and although Verosika is correct, the boy has magical hands. What happens is that I don't know how to explain it properly, but there was something else. Summer said with uncertainty. What do you mean, Summer? Verosika asked with as much curiosity and confusion as the others, except for one, Vortex. The hellhound bodyguard. He could have a pretty good idea of what Summer wanted to say, but she wanted to hear what the feline had to say first, to confirm it. Well, I felt his love when he saw me, I guess, Summer admitted softly. Like as soon as he saw me, it was like I could feel his emotions. Not my emotions, his emotions. That's pretty crazy, isn't it? I know it's a little bit hard to believe, but it's the only way I can really describe it, Summer replied, unsure how to explain the situation, since it was the first time something like this had happened to her. You felt like a huge feeling of being unconditionally loved, adored, and appreciated by someone who feels all of that as soon as they see you, in a totally sincere and pure way, without any kind of cheating or second intention, similar to when you are with those people who love you, like when you're with your girlfriend, and it all comes from Isaac in a similar but different way. I'm correct, right? Vortex said, calling everyone, especially Summer, who looked at him totally surprised. Yes. That's it. That's exactly how I felt. How did you know? Asked the feline, completely amazed with the precision of a surgeon, with which the hellhound described the situation she experienced when being with the boy. 'Cause I get the same thing from the little fella. Vortex chuckled, rubbing the back of his head. Kid loves his animals, and that affection just sorta rubs off on ya. Ha, he's a good kid. The hellhound explained the situation. Verosika nodded. Yeah, the same way he reacted to Summer, that's how Isaac was when he saw Tex the first time, and I hadn't understood it at least until now. Wait, I didn't know why Tex reacted like this until now. You hadn't been with him for more than 3 weeks? Dia asked, a bit confused. Yes, but it wasn't until a few hours ago that he saw our true forms, and I hadn't had time to ask, especially because of an idiot who interrupted the moment, and I didn't think about it much. Verosika replied. Oh, I understand. Dia said. Can I ask a few questions? Said the voice, and when everyone turned to see who the owner was, it turned out to be one of the angels, more specifically Cletus. Sure, go ahead, Verosika told him. Thank you. My questions are, what or who is this guy? How is he able to do such unique things? Where did you find him? Verosika tilted her head to the side. Well, in order, he seems to be a human child that was touched by the blessing of heaven and the curses of hell, which is what gave him these strange powers. As for where I found him, it was in his house, which was corrupted, demonic, and honestly no place any child should ever be. Not even a hellborn should have to see the nightmares that house had on display. Huh, is that how it really happened? Cletus asked, to which Verosika made a doubtful face. Well, it's more of a theory, the only one I could come up with after I found him. I saw what he is capable of doing, and what others perceive of him. Just a theory. Is that all you know about why he is the way he is? The angel asked again, because he really wanted answers. Well, yeah, it's the closest I have to Isaac's origin, but I'm really not sure how or why the boy has those abilities. The succubus responded, to which the cherub was left thinking. And how did you find him? You mentioned that he was in a haunted house. Can you tell me what exactly happened the first time you met? She asked once more, to which Verosika grimaced, recalling the situation. So, do you want me to tell you and your companions the story in detail? Are you sure? Because I warn you that it's not pretty or pleasant at all, she asked. Yeah, we really want to know as much as we can. Cletus assured him. All right, here we go. Verosika said as she gasped for air, and she prepared to narrate to them how she and Isaac met. The 3 angelic beings were increasingly more and more horrified the longer the story went on, to the point where they all began to cry and the hellborns weren't holding up much better. Esna wound up passing out and being caught by Skrell as Ronia actually sat still for a prolonged period of time, her eyes wide in disbelief. Vortex was visibly distraught, arms crossed, eyes closed and ears drooped, while Dia was comforting a devastated Summer with an embrace. Although Verosika's employees knew that Isaac was a child abused by his original mother, because the demon popstar told them, they did not know that the child had gone through such atrocious and horrendous torture. Even Vortex, seeing Isaac for the first time, with all those cables and tubes connected to his small body, he already suspected that something terrible had happened to Isaac. Still, that didn't make it any less horrible, hearing the whole story in detail, and the angels weren't having a better time. In fact, you could say it was the exact opposite. No, poor creature, Colin said, feeling a great pain in his ribs and in his soul, with tears running down his cheeks. How? How is this possible? How could that be do that to her own son? Exclaimed angrily, but also full of pain and sadness, and Keeney. Cletus said nothing, he just closed his eyes as tears fell from his face just like those of his companions. The 3 seraphs are in shock, with tears in their eyes, could hardly believe the story they had just heard, that someone could be so cruel and so sadistic, so ruthless towards a child was something really appalling and indescribable. But that child was Isaac? That only made everything even worse, thousands of times worse. Verosika frowned softly. It made sense that the cherubs were more sensitive to this information than the rest of them. After all, they were the least used to the horrors of the universe. They'd lived in paradise their entire life and never had to deal with it until recently. Ho, hick ho, how this hick is possible? How can a child like him suffer so much? Why? Why did she torture him like that? Cletus asked with great difficulty, between sobs of pain. Verosika was heartbroken to see the angel like this, especially because she reminded her a little of Isaac in appearance, especially when she cried. I don't know. I just don't know, and it seems, she answered with sadness, anger and helplessness, not even knowing why Isaac had to suffer something like that. Verosika's answer, or rather the lack of an answer, only saddened the three angels even more. Isaac, in the short time they had known him, had proven to be a wonderful and incredible child in more than one aspect. Not only had he saved their lives, but he had also done so without asking for anything in return, and without any hidden evil intentions. Of course, maybe he was all too hasty, since they had barely known him for a day, but they could feel that the boy's intentions were completely genuine, as well as that of his caregivers, to their great surprise. Knowing that he had to go through all that, for no reason or reason, was something as horrible as it was sad. Why? Why was the world so cruel to those who did not deserve it the absolute least? What could little Isaac have possibly done to deserve such torment? Cletus asked, full of pain and anger. Without waiting for an answer he continued. Nothing. Nothing he could have possibly done could ever warrant such abuse. He was a child. Why would the Lord allow such things to happen? Cletus asked again, not waiting for an answer, as felt his faith slipping. To everyone's surprise, Verosika answered Cletus's questions. Whatever that JRK you call Lord is planning, no matter how well it turns out, it doesn't make him any less worthy of the scorn of anyone with less than half a brain, she sneered. This caused a gasp by the other two angels. Keeney and Colin were in a similar state to Cletus, with almost the same questions, but their faith wasn't fading, at least not to the same degree. But Colin tried to say something, but he didn't have the right words, or the energy since he was still in shock from learning it. You cannot say that. Keeney said that, unlike her mate, she was hot-blooded enough to try to defend her lord. Oh really? Look little girl, I'll tell you what happened to Isaac. Even though it's atrocious, it's not exclusive. At least the part about being an innocent who suffers without reason is extremely common. Besides, I'm someone who was forced to lose many important people, because of that annual extermination, both me and the others here. Verosika said dryly. But and it doesn't matter what that JRK plans, he has already shown with these 2 points, and much more, that he is not worthy of anyone's respect or appreciation. Besides that whole he has a great deal plan was always a perfect excuse for people to ignore or justify things like what Isaac had to go through, she said with her voice full of hate and disgust, because that idea always seemed like a ridiculous excuse to her. But now, after all that her beloved Isaac had to go through, Verosika couldn't feel more disgust and anger for that empty excuse. She's right, shucks she's right, fellas, I mean, look at what goes on up there. How many people get into heaven? We got 12 people up there in the span of 3 years, and all they ever did was SCK his Cletus took a deep breath to calm himself down. He threw us away like we were nothing. We were supposed to be his children and he just threw us out because we made a mistake, not even a second chance. He never cared. Wait, what if this is all a test? Keeney exclaimed. Really, Keeney? Cletus said, not believing what his partner was saying. Well, we were expelled, and after a while we met Isaac, and he not only saved our lives, but he made us much more than we were before. He ascended us, she said, and Cletus thought about what she said. Wait, what are you trying to say? Verosika asked, not liking the implications of Colin's words. Well, what if Isaac is part of his plan? What if he's God himself, she said. Cletus groaned and facepalmed. Please don't hold this against them, Miss Verosika, they're not taking this whole situation very well at all, and they've kinda been in denial for the past few days. It'll pass soon, I promise. Verosika put a hand over her mouth and snorted. And then she started to laugh uncontrollably. You think he's ha. Little Isaac, God himself, letting some succubus just scoop him up, snuggle and adopt him. That's just too funny. But it could be true. Keeney whined. He is a miracle worker, Vortex mused. But if he really was God himself, why would he bother helping some random hellhound fix his busted eye? Well, he's not as warm as he used to be, but he's still the same kind, just ruler we used to know deep down, so he just wanted to help, Colin murmured shyly, tapping his hooves together. I could do some research and try and see if I can figure anything out, Esna shyly offered from her spot on the floor, having just regained consciousness. There's bound to be some information on what kind of gifts Isaac has somewhere in that library. Verosika looked at Enza with a smile and answered her. Great idea, Enza, I'd be delighted with that. And actually, I think I may have something that can help us, but let me finish these two and their absurd ideas first, okay? The succubus said, to which the imp nodded. Verosika looked back at his two angels and his reaction to his response. while Colin looked sad and embarrassed, while Keeney, "Wait, dumb idea?" asked the yellow angelic lamb indignantly. "Of course, it's an absurd idea, what else would I call the nonsense you said?" asked the succubus. "Oh yeah? And what do you call this?" asked Keeney, whose eyes began to glow, before everyone watched as she was suddenly engulfed in an explosion of light and smoke. By the time the smoke cleared and the light dimmed rapidly, everyone except Vortex and Verosika looked in shock at Keeney, who now had enormous white wings, the ribbon on her back now loose and flowing freely, her person now wrapped in an aura of golden light, a matching halo floating above her head and her eyes glowing with colors to match her pupils and irises. And their reactions from the Hellborns who worked for Verosika, seeing and feeling the power emanating from the lamb, revealing her true nature in completely unexpected ways, were immediate. "I mean that is pretty major," Summer admitted, eyes widened at the sight. "Yeah, I don't know what other explanation there is if Isaac did that," Dia agreed. "Unless the big guy upstairs loaned the kid some of his power just to see what would happen, wouldn't be the first time he gave a mortal access to some of his power. Remember that Moses guy?" Skrell noted. "Wait, you were angels all this time?" Ronia exclaimed, unable to believe what she was seeing. Esna, for her part, couldn't say anything other than wide-eyed as her jaw almost literally dropped to the ground, at the revelation that those 3 children were angels all along. Cletus looked at the demons and then at Colin, who looked unsure, before shrugging. "Well, it's not like we plan to hide it for long. Although it would have been better at another time, but while we're at it," Cletus said, and then both he and Colin followed Keeney's lead, and after an explosion of smoke and light, the Hellborn saw the true form. From them. Everyone was shocked to see that the 3 strange-looking but cute kids were actually child angels. "What are you 3? Asked Esna, who was finally able to speak, as her brain caught up. They're angels, isn't it obvious?" Skreel asked, to which Esna shook her head. "And oh no, I mean what kind of angels are they? I've never seen anything like that before," the imp said, to which Keeney responded. "We are seraphim," he said with a proud smile, spreading his arms and wings, to which everyone was at a loss regarding that revelation, everyone except Verosika, Vortex and surprisingly Esna, who responded with a gasp filled with even greater surprise. That's impossible." "Esna, do you know what he means by that?" Dia asked, because like the rest of the mansion employees, they wanted to know why the imp was so surprised by the information. Esna forced herself to calm down a bit before answering. "Yes, I've read about that. Seraphim are supposed to be the highest-ranking angels in heaven," she said, which caught the attention of all the Verosika employees. "Wait, how high is the rank we're talking about?" asked Skrell. "The rank is so high, but so high that there are only 2 people in all of creation that are above them, one of them is God." Esna dropped that bombshell on them, the same one that had just dropped the yellow lamb moments before. "And you're down here?" Ronia asked, wide-eyed. "Why are you down here if you're ranked so high?" Well, that's the thing, the little fella gave us this power, we were just 3 low-ranking powerless cherubs just a few hours ago. That's why my pals here think he might actually be God. But Skrell might actually be onto something. The Lord works in mysterious ways, or that the people say," Cletus said dismissively, before continuing. "Just a small dash of his power can do all sorts of stuff, and he does pick and choose those pure enough of heart to wield a portion of his power. But then that doesn't explain the more hellish parts of his powers." "Okay, that's enough, it was fun at the time, but seriously this nonsense is starting to tire me, shut this now." Verosika said, well, she was listening to the whole conversation, and for her the idea of her stopped being something amusingly stupid, too unpleasant, because of how plausible everything was becoming. "Verosika?" Summer asked when she saw her advancing to where the seraphim were, with a face and attitude that betrayed her state of mind, and she didn't look well. "What does Miss Verosika mean?" Colin asks, somewhat concerned about the succubus's attitude, while her partner only looked at Verosika before what she would say. "All this nonsense about Isaac being God, or an envoy of him, stops and is now," she said firmly, earning everyone's attention, especially the 3 seraphim. Keeney, who was outraged, was the first to respond. "Oh, come on, are you still saying that's nonsense? After all, what proof can we give that this silly theory is true?" Verosika asked. "Apart from our looks? The power we have? Or the fact that when Isaac saved us, the first time he gave us these gifts there was that sign that said, Revelation. Awaken your faith, what more proof do you need?" Keeney asked, to which Verosika couldn't give an answer right away. "Wait, what sign?" Ronia asked, to which Vortex replied. "Oh, it's just that when Isaac gives one of the gifts to someone, there's usually a text banner appearing above someone's head, apparently giving the name of the gift and what it does." "Really? What was yours called?" Summer asked. It was simply called Glass Eye, and it said something like DMG and luck. That's what he gave me. Wait, is that why you have different colored eyes now? Asked the cat sinner, somewhat astonished. Yes, and thanks to it I can see again. Vortex explained with a smile. Wait, if Vortex was given an eye that gave him back his sight, what did the little guy give you to make you look like that? Skrill asked again, this time to the angelic trio. After thinking back a bit, it was Cletus who answered the question. Well, the gifts that she gave us separately were the mind, the body and the soul, and then she gave us another two which would be the halo and revelations. He said, and before anyone could say anything Skrill asked another question. Wait, but that would be 5, that doesn't mean that at least 2 of you received one more gift, why does that happen? The imp said after doing the calculations in his head, to which Cletus responded. Oh no, that's not really the case. You see, he actually used another of his items, and actually duplicated the halo and revelations, so in the end he gave us 3 each, the angel explained, to which Dia was the next to speak. Wait, 3? To each of you? But why so many? Exclaimed the succubus just as surprised as the rest of the members of the mansion. Cause he's Kini began, but Cletus put a hand over her mouth to silence her. Cause he's the most generous and giving little soul I've ever seen in my gosh darn life, that's why. That little fellow, well, I'd say he's about as pure as they come. He said sincerely. And I'm gonna pay him back in full for it, you can bet on that. The way I see it, no good deed should ever go unrewarded. Okay, I can see that what you say is true, but that doesn't explain what inspired him to give you 3 as many more gifts than Vortex, Skrill said, and this caught the attention of the angels. What do you mean exactly? Colin asked curiously to the imp, to which he replied. Well, aside from the fact that Isaac had known Vortex the longest, he gave him only 1. What made you guys so special, that the little fella gave you so many gifts? Now that I think about it, how is it that you exactly met him? Asked Skrill, really curious to know how the first meeting of the 3 apparent children with Isaac was, even more so now that he knows that they were angels of great power, and all thanks to the boy. The rest of his teammates were the same as Skrill, and Kini responded. Well, we didn't actually find him, he came to us, said the angel. This answer confused even more the demons and sinners of the mansion. Wait, he came to you? I mean, did he go to heaven? How did he do that? And he wasn't with Miss Verosika? Asked Ronia so confused. No, he didn't go to heaven, actually Isaac found us on Earth. Kali replied. Wait, and how did he find you? What were you doing on Earth? Summer asked. In that the 3 angels made a face of discomfort, sadness and anger each one, remembering why they were on Earth in the first place. Well, it's a bit of a complicated story, Colin started, but he stopped, not finding the right words. We got into an altercation and Kini tried to continue, but she stopped as she clenched her fists in anger as she remembered what happened. We were banished from heaven. Cletus finished for his companions, with less difficulty, but no less sad, shame and pain. What? How? Why? Ronia asked very confusedly, so Cletus answered her. Well, we bumped into some imps up there, and we were trying to stop a man from taking his own life, and they wanted him dead, so we got into a bit of a tussle, and in the end, we ended up accidentally crushing the guy under a big piano, he sighed. And it's my fault, and then he clenched his fist in pain and rage, but this time not against the imp but against himself. I was the one who killed Lily, and I DMN us all, Cletus said, tears beginning to well up as he continued. It was an accident, I didn't mean to, I just got so frustrated with those 3 that it's my fault I was the one that shot that arrow. They should have just kicked me out, why'd they kick you guys out too? Cletus exclaimed, tearing up, tears running from his eyes. Oh, don't say that, Cletus, it's not true. Kini said, trying to comfort his friend, but Cletus didn't see it that way, who instead of crying, gave a sigh full of resignation and regret. You are wrong, actually it is, I have been a hypocrite, I created Cherub with the purpose of helping people, but we began to focus more on the prestige of saving those souls than doing it, said the angel, which Kini, now indignant, retorted. That's not true, what we did was to do the right thing. It's true, Kini, let's not deny it, we were as arrogant as the others in heaven, to be more holy and superior, and in the end for trying to save that old man, who was an obvious monster that was inevitably doomed, look what happened to us. Cletus exclaimed. Are you sure, maybe we're not confusing the situation? I've had time to reflect on that, to realize the truth, but it wasn't until now that I was able to see it clearly. Of the 3 of us, in the end the only one really committed to the cause, because it was the right thing more than anything, it was you, Colin. He said to his partner, who didn't say anything, other than being amazed by what the angel said. Then he stopped floating and slowly fell into the fire, his wings and ribbons also stopped fluttering and fell together with his, adjusting to his mood. I think that in the end I did deserve to be banished from heaven, and because of me, you were also punished, he finally said as the tears continued to flow. Both Verosika and the others wanted to hug the three of them, but she held back, and decided to do something else, so taking a step forward and with determination exclaimed, "That's bullshit." Nobody said anything, everyone directed all their attention, for that exclamation filled with such strength and intensity in the feeling that it was palpable. So it was easy to tell that she was very upset by what she had heard, but oddly enough, she wasn't upset towards the angels. "Did you forget what we talked about before? If so, I'll tell you again, you did not deserve to be expelled for what you did, because it was not your fault," she said. "But dash. No buts." Kini tried to speak, but Verosika cut her off, before continuing. "You three had one of the most brilliant and appealing ideas I've ever seen from heaven, and what if you did it for that? You felt proud and that's never wrong, we all have an ego, we all want to be proud of something, you are from heaven, earth, or hell and that is not bad. But look what happened to us," Cletus exclaimed. "Yes, and that doesn't change anything, I've seen a lot of people who out of pride do evil to others, who pride themselves on destroying, exploiting and making others suffer, monsters whose ego can only be served well, if the number of lives innocent or good destroyed is getting higher," she said, keeping silent for a moment as she remembered the times that had happened. Of course there were several who preferred assholes as victims, but others did not discriminate or seek noble souls to ruin. She put those thoughts aside and continued. "But believe me, of all the things that it would be wrong to do things out of pride or an excessive ego, helping others is not one of those. No matter what others say, it will never stop being stupid to attack someone out of pride or ego helps others," she said with a voice and look of determination so firm and hard, she felt almost indestructible. "Are you serious?" Colin asked somewhat hopeful, just like his friends. "Of course," she exclaimed with a smile. "It doesn't matter that you were psychopaths incapable of empathy, who only saw the people you helped as a mere number, it still counts as a good deed, for the wrong reasons, but it's still a good deed in the end." The three of them looked at each other surprised by what Verosika was saying, but the succubus hadn't finished. "And since I know that you are not psychopaths, but that you really enjoyed helping others, that only makes those assholes and scares look even worse than the banished from heaven, because they had their heads so deep in their own asses, to realize the valuable service you provided to the world," she said. "But do you have to be so rude? How are you so sure?" "Don't say I'm rude, because it's the truth and I'm being soft, and also I say I must say, what is reality, and if you don't believe me, ask all those people that you helped, all the brothers and sisters who could meet once again, to all those who can have another chance to enjoy life next to their friends." She paused and smiled fondly before continuing. "To all the parents who can come back to their home, to hug and kiss their children," she said softly and happily, before looking at the three angels. "And all thanks to you three," she said with a smile of joy and gratitude. The three of them began to tear up at her words. Verosika blinked when she felt a sudden weight around her legs, and she looked down to see Cletus had wrapped his arms around her legs in a hug. And then Colin and Kini followed suit. Verosika began to hug them, while the others watched the scene with different levels of tenderness. When the three of them relaxed a bit, they floated again. "Thanks for that," Colin said gratefully. "Yeah, we really needed that," Cletus confirmed. Kini said nothing, but nodded with a smile as she floated back up glowing. "They really should turn that power back off, we can't keep it that way for long," was the intrusive thought that Verosika had, seeing the three of them in that angelic form, and feeling the power emanating that power, and she couldn't disagree. "I'm glad I helped you, but could you go back, how do I say this, turn off your seraph form? Could you draw unwanted attention, if you haven't already?" Verosika asked them. Despite the fact that they did not like the idea very much, did so, for which they soon descended to the ground, and both the wings and the halos, as well as the golden and divine aura of power, disappeared, leaving them with the ribbons. The three of them sighed, disappointed to return to their simple appearances. Seeing this, Verosika asked them, "Is it really very uncomfortable for you to be with Isaac's gifts turned off? Is it painful or something?" To which Colin replied, "Not really, mostly because we didn't turn them off completely, but it just feels a little off." The angel tried to explain, although Verosika couldn't quite understand. "It's like, you wear really uncomfortable clothes?" asked the succubus, trying to see if she was able to understand what the blue lamb was trying to tell her. "No, it would actually be like you forgot something," tried to say Kini. "Oh. I mean, is it like going naked? I mean, do you guys feel naked right now? Like the exhibitionists?" Ronia asked, causing the seraphs to look somewhat embarrassed, to which Kini responded quickly. "No. It's not that. It's more like you're missing something very important, but not like that. Like you forgot your cell phone at home? Vortex asked, to which Cletus analyzed a bit and responded. Yeah, something like that, only more personal and you can't move without it. So, it's like you're missing a leg and you left the prosthesis at home? Verosika asked. Exactly. Although we can get used to it in the end, it won't be completely. Cletus said. Verosika thought about it for a moment, and then said. Well, if that's the case, then I'll investigate later if there's a way that no one can detect them inside the house, and when we get a chance to go to Earth again, we'll go to a special place, that way they could be free to go in their full forms. Really? Asked all three at the same time. Verosika shrugged her shoulders. I'm nothing if not accommodating to my house guests. Shucks, Miss Verosika, seems we had you demons all wrong. We were brought up to believe you were all inherently evil, but you've been amazing. Cletus said softly. TCH, now I can hear the bias dripping from our elders' mouths. Keeney huffed. Thank you, Colin whispered. You're welcome. You decided to protect good people, and although I'm not an altruistic person, at least I don't see myself in that vocation. But I have learned to respect people who do that, said Verosika. At that Cletus frowned and sighed briefly, but he was not one filled with sadness as before, but with acceptance, before speaking. Well, since we're being honest, and you've done so much for us, I think it's necessary to tell the whole truth, said the angel, and this caught everyone's attention. What do you mean? Asked the succubus pop star, while she saw the angel scratching his head uncomfortably. Well, we haven't been 100% honest, he said, to which many raised an eyebrow. So, you've been lying to us about something? Vortex said with a hint of disgust in his voice. Well, not to lie at all, but more to leave out some things and say other things on impulse. He spoke. Can you explain? Skrell asked, curious what he was trying to say to Cletus, and under everyone's watchful eyes, he began to speak. To begin with, when I said that there was no one in heaven, that of the last 12 people who entered heaven in the last 3 years, it was because they were only professional kissers and that's it. Actually there are some who are really good people. I said the above because I was emotional, although in my defense I will say the majority, if they are just that, some kissers, or people who did not deserve to be in heaven. Cletus explained, though the last bit caught everyone's attention. Wait, why do you say that some of them didn't deserve to be in heaven? Summer asked. Because a lot of them were really despicable and despotic people, like Lyle Lipton, the angel answered once more, which surprised everyone. Wait, that wasn't the name of the guy they were trying to protect, but they failed and got banished? Yes, the same, and many people are like him in heaven. Exactly what was he like? What was wrong with him? Dia asks, to which Cletus begins to narrate the entire situation around Lyle Lipton, from when they were sent to their encounter with Imp, and how the three ended up banished in detail. When the angel finished telling the story, the inhabitants of the mansion were quite surprised as well as confused. So, just to be clear, Skrell began, was it for trying to protect this man, and killing him by accident, that he was real that you three got kicked out of heaven? Asked Skrell. Yeah, basically. Cletus replied, as embarrassed as Colin and Keeney. Okay, so, can you explain to me now how you thought it would be a good idea to save Lipton? If it was obvious that he was condemned to be in hell, how did you think that someone like that would have the slightest chance of being accepted in heaven? What were you guys thinking? He asked three very embarrassed angels, the imp butler, who, like the rest of the inhabitants of the mansion, could not understand how the three seraphim thought that this was a good idea. Frink Haber, Colin replied suddenly. Huh? What did you say? Asked Skrell. Frink Haber, he was the reason we thought it was a good idea, answered the blue lamb. Who is this Frink? A relative of Lipton's or something? Verosika asked. Not really. Wait, Frink Haber? You mean the scientist was one of the most brilliant minds of the last century, said the librarian imp. Yes, that one. Cletus confirmed to Esna. Wait, who are you holding? Why is it so important? He asked the popstar succubus again, to which the imp replied. Well, Frink Haber was one of the most important scientists in history who was responsible for creating the Haber-Bosch method, which made it possible to synthesize efficiently and cheaply to produce ammonia. And that's important because? Verosika asked without understanding the situation very well. It is important because that was what made Frink responsible for killing millions of people, since basically thanks to the fact that with this he created the mustard gas, and that is how Frink became the father of war chemistry. Esna said, taking everyone by surprise. Wait, and it's because of this guy that you guys tried to save Lyle's life? Verosika asked, still not understanding why the former cherub members tried to save Lipton. Yes, since he was also responsible for saving countless millions of people, since with his creation he allowed the creation of fertilizer on an industrial scale, and therefore modern agriculture. Colin defended and Cletus continued for him. And not only modern agriculture, but mustard gas also turned out to be another creation with which countless lives would be saved, since it had the particularity that cells divide, which after much research, was perfected to be so. Used against cancer, so Frink would also be the father of modern agriculture, and the grandfather of chemotherapy. The angel finished explaining all the Hellborn, surprised to a greater or lesser extent by the information. So you thought that Lyle Lipton would be the same as Frink Haber, and that's why you decided to help him? Yeah, basically that's why, Keeney said. I see. But what was Frink Haber like as a person? Verosika asked. Well, answering that is very difficult to answer. Cletus said with difficulty. Because, the succubus asked curiously. He was basically someone with his own morals, a person with great ambitions, but he was not someone evil and with a life full of many ups and downs. As I said, a complicated situation, in the end not even heaven knew how to judge him properly. He had flaws and virtues, and as Cletus said, he had ups and downs, both very much and very significant, Cletus murmured, clasping his fingers together and looking down. And haunted by some of the things he created. In the end, being the father of chemical warfare cost him a lot in life. His wife, Keeney spoke, pausing, as if the next thing was hard for her to say. She killed herself by not being able to stand what her husband's creations were, and then her son did the same. This earned a wave of horrified gasps from the inhabitants of the house. And Lipton? Well, he wasn't pure evil. He seemed to have an appreciation for the beauty of nature, and the innocence of children, until those three ruined it for him, but all in all he was much worse. Oh gosh, all this time I was just trying to chase glory and I didn't even realize it, Cletus breathed. Well, you don't need to keep blaming yourself, in the end both you and your teammates can use that to be a better judge of character in the future. Skrell told him. Yes, that's true. Thank you. Cletus exclaimed with enthusiasm, one that was shared by Keeney and Colin. But what are we going to do now? Asked the blue angelic lamb. Well, that's a good question, what to do with you three? Verosika started thinking, until she had an idea. Well, I have a plan, but first a few questions. What would you be willing to do for Isaac? What do you want to do with or for him? Asked the succubus. Cletus stepped forward. Ma'am, I owe that boy my life for what he's done for us. I'll do anything to pay him back. You can just consider us his shields. Yeah. The three of us are now among the most powerful beings in all of hell now, so we can handle darn near anything that might try and hurt the little guy. We'll be his guardian angels. Well, I'm glad to know you're so excited about it. Verosika said, seeing how determined and honest Cletus was with his statements. Then he turned to look at Keeney and Colin. But I need to know, what about the two of you? I want to make sure that the three of you are in the same boat. Of course. Colin said, straightening up. We're at his service. Keeney saluted. We owe him every bit as much as Cletus does. We wouldn't have anything if it wasn't for him. Keeping him safe is the least we can do. Okay, so you're officially in charge of helping take care of Isaac, but before you can do that, you'll have some important guidelines to follow, so pay attention, Verosika said, to which the angels prepared to listen intently. Well, first, if you really want to protect Isaac, you will have to follow my instructions, or failing that, those I will leave in charge, since as I said before, you would help take care of Isaac, but you will not be the only ones, this mainly because we're in hell, and they'll need to learn how things are here first, so they'll be learning from us. Oh yeah, can do, Miss Verosika ma'am. Cletus said with a salute. We'll be sure to pay real close attention to your every word, Scout's honor. Yeah, I definitely want to know all I can about this place. You never know when something dangerous might come along, Colin said nervously, wringing his hooves together. Colin is right, we will need information on what we can find. Keeney said as he nodded. Satisfied with that, Verosika continued. Well, I'm glad it's like that, because it's important to understand that point to understand the next one, and that is, nothing, I repeat, and no religion around Isaac. Wait, what? Why? Keeney asked indignantly. Because his mother was an unhinged religious nut that used it to hurt him in any way she could. She used it to convince him he was evil and deserved to suffer. He has trauma related to it, and bringing it up will only hurt him. The succubus explained. Verosika sighed heavily, remembering the torture Isaac suffered, and the monstrous damage it took to his mind, if the drawings and thoughts of himself are any indication. He's had enough of that for several lifetimes. I plan to inform him how things really work in the three worlds, but without embellishing him or telling him what he wants to hear, unless it's the truth, and this has to be something that must be done discreetly, so there are things that we won't explain to him yet, but as he grows up. Oh come on. How can you think that's the right decision? I mean, look what it turned the three of us into, it turned us into seraphim. Keeney tried to defend. Then Verosika's countenance changed to one of thought, and then she spoke. Yeah, that's another thing I wanted to talk to you about, this whole Isaac is God thing, and I have to ask you, how are you so sure about that? Isn't that obvious? There's only one person who Kini was interrupted by the succubus before finishing her sentence. Yeah, I know that whole thing. The thing is, how do you know they're real seraphim? Have you ever seen one? Kini was going to reply, but at that moment she was silent, and she began to reflect for a moment, something that her angelic companions did. Well, not really, we never had the honor of seeing one in person, said the yellow lamb. Besides, we don't look like what's described as one either, since we're not a wheel of gold and surrounded by eyes, Colin said. That's true, although it's also true that they can also change their appearance, at least that's what I've read. Cletus mused aloud. That's what I wanted to get to. From what we know, there are only two plausible explanations, or is there the absurd idea that Isaac is the creator god of the universe in person, this is his power, and everything that implies, even the great nonsense and danger of the whole situation. Or, Verosika said and paused, considering the other option. Or? Kini asked. Or it's all a misunderstanding. Verosika said, an answer that left everyone dissatisfied, especially the yellow lamb. Okay, if it's all a misunderstanding, how do you explain the boy being so special? And all this divine power? The fact that one of the gifts he gave us said, awaken your faith, and it transformed us into who we are. I think the signs are not that confusing. Kini argument. As I said before, it could all be part of a big misunderstanding, and it's not really as obvious as it seems. After all, if he's supposed to be God himself, what about the hellish side of his power? Before the yellow lamb said anything, Cletus spoke. Kini, Verosika may have a point. Wait, really? Kini asked a little incredulously. From the first time we met him we saw him, he was like a mixture of both parts, but since we were ascended by him, I realized that there was something else as well. What the angel had said, powerfully called the attention of all those present there. Wait, how's that for, also something else? Verosika asked with a lot of curiosity but also a tinge of concern. I'm not really sure, I can't recognize what it is, but in addition to the heavenly and infernal energies that Isaac possesses, there is also a third part, I'm not sure what it is. But it is very familiar and at the same time different, explained the angel. Well, that adds another level of complexity to the whole thing with Isaac. Maybe we'll find an answer to all the unknowns that surround the boy, or maybe we never will, and that's why, and for an infinity of reasons more than the idea of Isaac having any relationship with God is absurd, and treating him accordingly even more. He doesn't need people who adore him and kiss his butt, but who really want to give him love, protection and tenderness, Verosika said to the three angels, without waiting for an answer she continued. I can count on you to do at least half of that, she asked. Of course, exclaimed the Puto with determination. Yes, we will do it. Colin said softly. Okay, that's fine, and you? Verosika asked Kini, who was reflecting on what the demon said. Right, yeah, okay. Sorry about that. I won't kiss his bum like you said. She rubbed her arm with her hoof, clearly in discomfort. Verosika chuckled. Not a fan of strong language, huh? Well, you'll get accustomed to it the longer you stay down here, because everyone curses like AF in Drunken Sailor in this neck of the woods. Does that mean we're forced to talk like that? Even in front of Isaac? Colin asked, a little worried about what the boy would turn on. To her surprise, Verosika's eyes widened in alarm. Oh no, she responded quickly. It's not mandatory that they do it, although they do tolerate it, and they can talk like that if they want. They won't be penalized for it, but they definitely won't talk like that in front of Isaac. They will have to do like the others, and avoid swearing in front of Isaac. Him, at least until he's a teenager, that's clear, she asked him, and the three nodded. Well, the other thing I wanted you to know is that in addition to taking care of Isaac, you will be doing other things in the mansion. I suppose you have skills for something other than being guardian angels, right? Yes, in fact, to carry out Cherub, we had to learn several things, from administration to medicine, among many others, although we are not experts in all of that. Cletus reported. Okay, sure, we can find a place for you, especially if you're willing to learn new things. That won't be a problem, right? Verosika asked. Not really, Colin replied. If necessary, I don't see the problem. Kini said with a shrug. Of course not, in fact I feel like I could learn anything more easily. Cletus said with great enthusiasm, something that caught the attention of those present. That reminds me, how did you realize that Isaac had that third part inside of him? Neither Colin nor I have managed to see anything yet. Kini asked curiously, to which the angel boy was thoughtful for a moment. Well, not really, but lately my mind has felt different, as if I could realize things that I hadn't noticed before, he said. Is that why you had been so thoughtful before in the car? Colin asks. Yes, this is why, confirmed Cletus. Well, that has to be the work of the gift that Isaac gave you, there is no other explanation. Wait, what was the gift that Isaac gave him? Summer asked. It was one called the mind, which I see makes you more intelligent or attentive, right? Verosika responded to the feline sinner, and then turned to Cletus, to see if she was right, and the angel child nodded. Yes, something more or less like that, he answered. Well, we can see that in detail later, it's getting late, there are a few more things to talk about, but they're not urgent, so we can talk about them later, so we can end this meeting, okay? Verosika asked everyone present, who expressed their support for the idea in various ways, since there was a lot to fall asleep for everyone after the enormous amount of response and revelations that had occurred in such a short time. Okay, Summer, can you take these three to the guest room? They'll have to sleep together in the same room, and then we'll take care of preparing a room for each of them. Sure. This way. They both said to immediately guide the three angels to where they would spend the night, while the others withdrew, and Verosika approached Vortex. Oh Vortex, before you go, there's something I have to ask you, when do you think you can bring your girlfriend here to talk to her about what we agreed on? Is it because of the babysitting thing? I thought the three of them would be enough, asked the Hellhound. Yeah, but they're not going to be available all the time, and it's always nice to have more people to confide in, and if half of what you say about your girlfriend is true, then it's smart to have her take care of Isaac. Well, that's true, and lucky for you she's been looking forward to meeting the little man. Vortex told Verosika. Really? She asked enthusiastically. Vortex chuckled and nodded his head. Yep, she loves kids, always has. Probably gonna spoil the little fella a bit, hope you don't mind. No way, not at all, he definitely needs it at this point. How come to think of it, who is your girlfriend, anyway? Vortex grinned. Wheel, that's a surprise. Ah, come on, if she's a big-name celebrity, it's probably no one I haven't already met. Vortex just laughed. If only you knew. Verosika pouted. You can be so cruel sometimes. In any case, she wants to meet you and Isaac as soon as possible, and she wants to know when you're available. Can she come tomorrow? Verosika asked. Vortex perked up. Sure thing. I'll call and let her know. Ah, you guys are gonna love her, she's the sweetest girl you've ever met. He chuckled to himself at his own joke, which was lost on Verosika, who smirked. Sounds promising. After that, Vortex left, and before Verosika did the same, she noticed that Esna was still there, which made the succubus happy, since she had a matter to discuss with her. Oh, Esna, I'm glad you're still here. Verosika said with a smile. Well, it's just that you said that he had something to talk to me about, regarding Isaac, answered the shy imp. Oh yes, look, I have a task for you, and that is that I want you to help me investigate everything we can regarding Isaac and the gifts that he has. Really? Asked the imp, quite interested in the task, to which succumbed to her with an enthusiastic smile. Yes, we can start this tomorrow, after my meeting with Vortex's girlfriend. Luckily for me, this will not be something that we have to start completely from scratch. I recently found out that, from the drawings that have been doing all this time, many are actually in relation to these items, or cool stuff, as he sometimes calls them. Drawings? Do you know if there are any that indicate where Isaac got these items from? Esna's asked, to which Verosika shook her head. The truth is that he doesn't know. I hadn't had time or much motivation to see all the drawings, especially since he usually captures his traumas in them. Verosika said awkwardly. Oh dear, was what the imp said with regret and sadness. Yes, that's why I'm glad you offered to investigate a while ago. We can together see if we can find some answers. The succubus finished saying her plan. Esna smiled and nodded her head. Oh, yes, Miss Verosika, it would be my pleasure to help you with this. She said eagerly, happy to have a task that would put her mind to the test. Verosika smirked and nodded her head in appreciation. Great. We can get started sometime tomorrow, after my meeting with Vortex's girlfriend. Excellent, I'll be ready. Good night, Miss Verosika, the imp said respectfully as she withdrew. Good night, Esna, the succubus said as she did the same, and retired to sleep. Verosika went up the stairs towards her room. On the way she decided to take a quick look at Isaac, so she opened the door softly and quietly, and saw him sleeping peacefully while he her thumb, and while she suppressed a shriek of tenderness, she closed the door again, so as not to disturb her sleep. After bathing and putting on her nightwear, she reflected for a moment on everything that had happened that day. Finding the cherubs, that Isaac will save them, ascending them, the meeting in the mansion, that Kini will affirm that Isaac is God, the questions and answers. What a day, was all she could say. She thought for a moment about what the future would be like from now on, but she wasn't clear. So finally, she decided to surrender to the arms of Morpheus, to sleep peacefully. Or that was the idea. Verosika felt that something was different. When the mist of the dream enveloped her mind, she could perceive that it was not the same. She doesn't know how much time passed. But she knew it wasn't long, when she opened her eyes, and found herself in a very strange setting. No matter where she looked, she saw a strange moorland, with a pearly white sky and a silvery gray ground, which when stepped on, produced ripples like water. What is this place? Where am I? Where are the others? Where is Isaac? Were the questions she asked herself while she looked from one side to the other without finding anything or anyone familiar, which was beginning to worry her. Before she could ask or do anything else, she noticed a shadowy couple covering her, and when she turned around, she couldn't believe her eyes. The shadows were of two beings, huge figures, distorted by the shadow, so Verosika could make out some features, since one had what looked like a hood and a large staff, and the other seemed to have wings, but the most striking detail were her eyes, brilliant orbs that looked directly into her soul. "Verosika Mayday, we need to talk," said one of the figures in a deep, commanding and totally familiar voice. Meanwhile, in another place in hell, one could find one of the many bad neighborhoods in hell. A gang was in their lair. They stood out for being all covered in bruises and many different wounds. You could see everything from bruises and black eyes, to horns, teeth, broken arms and legs, as if a train had passed them all and each one had hit them all, and they would have miraculously come out alive. "Okay, let me see if I understand. Are you telling me that you decided to mess with a random hellhound and left them in this condition?" said one of them, who was a sinner with a muscular build, red skin and an elegant black suit, with gold jewelry and chains. "Yes, boss," responded one of his men, a muscular shark, green and white, just as muscular, but less tall, and which was missing most of its teeth. "But," the sinner exploded with rage. "What the F? You were 14 men with arms, so F useless to let yourself be defeated by a single foodsy dog?" He shouted full of disbelief and rage, while he slammed his fists against the desk. You could hear how the wood creaked from the blow. When it broke, something that made most of the criminals shudder. I have no idea. "He was like a beast with muscles of steel," said one of his subordinates, an imp with a constitution, who had his face swollen and his two horns broken. "And why didn't you just shoot the Sanuva until he was worse than a sieve motherfuckers? It doesn't matter if he was Chuck Norris himself, no fighter survives a shot to the head. They had guns. Why didn't they use them?" the sinner asked without understanding, and with a lot of anger. "It wasn't our fault. Something strange happened, all the weapons broke," said another imp, thinner, bent over, who had several bandages covering his body. "What? All weapons?" At the same time, the gang leader exclaimed in disbelief. "Yes, we tried everything to shoot them, but nothing worked, so that's why we went to fists and used what we had to hit him," said the imp with a large complexion and broken horns, from before. "And that's why out of 14 people, only the 3 of you were healthy enough to crawl back, while the others can't even speak yet, right?" The demons in front of him nodded, because they were the ones who had had the best. The rest could barely walk, much less talk, many still complaining about the pain. Suddenly the place shook slightly. "Boo-hoo-hoo," one of them cried. "For the love of, as if these earthquakes weren't enough. The other mafia bosses will make fun of us as soon as they find out. Any respect we have will go down the drain." The sinner boss rubbed his head with frustration, then looked at his subordinates. "Listen to me, you useless people. If you don't want us to be treated like low-level scum, you will find that disgusting dog, and you will bring me his fur as a new coat from him, and everyone around him will take his weapons, and they will make sure they are in perfect condition, and they will teach him before killing him and everyone, that no one messes with us, understand?" The 3 demons in front of him nodded. The boss sat down again and rubbed the temples of his head, to quell the growing migraine that was generating all the anger of indignation. "I'm surrounded by useless people, 14 armed men, beaten by a single F-dog. Boo-hoo-hoo," the crying was heard again. "Oh, 4F. Stop crying," he screamed in rage, but the crying did not stop. "Are you challenging me? I'm going to give you a reason to cry if you don't stop F-talking now," he shouted, smashing his fists on his desk again. "Boo-hoo-hoo-hoo. That is." Suddenly the boss threw himself into the air with force full of fury, ready to kill someone. "Who is this? Who is the fgot whose DMN mouth cords I should tear out?" the boss asked, looking at all of his lackeys, to see who was making that horrible sound for him, but everyone was silent, and staring at him, with fear. "Boo-hoo-hoo-hoo." The crying was heard again, and so the giant sinner discovered that none of his crooks were the ones who were crying. The crying continued, and that led the boss, and the 3 crooks who were healthier, to discover that the crying was coming from outside, more specifically from behind the door that gave access to the entrance, a pair of large doors, and one of them managed to identify the source of the crying. "Boss, I think it's a child crying," said the skinny imp. "Oh yeah? I don't know how I got here. But hey, it will help take away all the stress you guys have caused me," he said, going straight to open the door, and when he did, he was greeted with a strange vision. The hallway, which gave access to another part of the warehouse where their base was very dark, and for some reason it was larger than they remembered, but neither the chief nor his crook paid attention to that, since they found in the shadows the source of the crying, which was coming towards them slowly. "Okay, you brat, I don't know how you got here, but I'll give you a reason. What the f?" The boss interrupted himself when he suddenly saw the child better. Indeed, it must have been a child, but one whose body was down to the bones, also filled with all kinds of horrible scars, wounds, and places full of signs of necrosis, all clearly visible because the said child was naked. But the worst thing was the creature's head, because it had a huge deformed mass, almost twice as big as his body, with eyes and mouth from which blood came out, where his head should be. Well, he didn't have eyes, but only one eye in the singular, since where the other one should be, and a large part of his head, there was what looked like a huge black sphere, which seemed to have been forcibly grafted, and from which more blood came out, which the boss quickly realized was a bomb. He walked slowly at first, but when the sinner chief and his crook saw him and them, the creature walked much faster towards them. The chief sinner, horrified by the horrible thing, and disgusted beyond measure at not being able to see it, and even more so at being touched by it, took the nearest crook, who was more shocked than he and his companions, and threw him into the creature. "You take care of it," he ordered as he lassoed it. The muscular shark demon did not have time to do or say anything, since the creature, barely getting close enough, began to swell more and more, and boom! Suddenly, and to the absolute surprise of everyone, the crying creature with the body of a child exploded with such power that even at the distance in which they fell to the ground pushed by the force, and with their ears ringing. When they managed to compose themselves, they saw enough of the result of the explosion, and what was left of Crook to Barone. The epicenter was completely destroyed, where before there was a neglected but still firm corridor, now there was nothing left but a smoky crater full of blood. And Crook? There was nothing left but an arm that was missing a large part of the muscles and several fingers. Before any of them could do anything else, they heard the crying from before again, only this time there was something that made it worse. It was several identical cries. Their fears were confirmed when they saw more equally deformed figures moving towards them. They quickly went back inside, closing the door, blocking it with whatever they could before moving away from the imminent explosion. Only the explosion never came. They continued to hear the group crying, but they hadn't exploded yet. "Boss, what happened? What was that explosion? Where is Scuds?" the other crooks asked. "Dead, some thing suddenly came and killed him." The broken-horned imp responded, terrified. "Yes. And now there is an army of those things here." "What are we doing, boss?" said the skinny and tall imp, equally terrified when he saw how just one of those things was enough to almost make his companion disappear almost completely. "I'm trying to think." "Okay, take your weapons everyone, we have dash." "Boo-hoo-hoo-hoo." The sinner could not finish the sentence, since suddenly, from everywhere came more and more of those things that had killed his crook. Both his and his gang could do nothing but scream when the deformed creatures pounced on them. Meanwhile, a sinner in the shape of a snake was riding in his airship, while he saw in the distance a series of explosions destroying a warehouse. "Arg! That insufferable cherry bomb? Here? Not again. I haven't finished preparing my appealing machine yet," he said, and then left the area. So alright folks, that's all for today. Stay tuned for more crossovers. Do subscribe, like and share for more such videos. Also check out the story and Gamer95 on FANFICTIONnet. Press the bell icon to be notified first on release. See you in the next video. Till then, goodbye.